Hi, and welcome to the Spiritual Alchemy Energy Transfigurations, the podcast. Tonight we have author, artist, actress, real rebel, Monique Rebelle with us to talk about her book, Transcendence Calling. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
So her book's about Monique's experience with a spontaneous kundalini awakening. Is that how you would say?
Of course, yeah,
Okay.
you can call it that way. There are different terms for it. Kundalini rising. That's another way of saying Kundalini awakening. Yes.
Before we really get into talking about what your book is about, I had a couple questions. They're about the book and your experiences in the Kundalini awakening. You talk about you all of a sudden afterward you had the ability to read other people's feelings and thoughts,
Right.
which you didn't have prior.
I did to some degree, but not as much as afterwards. So before, I kind of, it was more vague, and I didn't pay much attention to it because it wasn't right in my face. I just always was that way, that I could kind of feel others, and especially when there were in closer relationships, I could feel what people's needs are, what their preferences are. And I mean, kind of when we were with our family, we know them better, so we know that, and we know with our friends in school and so on, because that was earlier times when I was still in Poland. I noticed that, but afterwards it was so much stronger, because there could be a group of strangers walking by, and I could tell what was going on in that group, and what their thoughts were, what their intentions were. It was much stronger. Yes.
Did you have to find yourself trying to tune that out at times, or?
Before I knew more about it, that is, before my experience, yes, I was a little bit apprehensive, in the same way I was apprehensive towards the psychic abilities that I had, because I didn't know where they were coming from, and I just didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know what it was, so it was a little scary. And afterwards, I kind of learned better how to deal with it, because I would have these things happening around when I was with people, in groups of people, and that was on Hawaii when I discovered it, when it first started happening on a larger scale, so to speak. So I could feel individuals, and I could feel groups, but I had always a way to get away from it. So I didn't have to deal with it. Although at the very beginning, I wasn't, when I first, because after I had my experience, like 2 months, not even 2 months after, I suddenly ended up on Maui, Hawaii, and lived there for 2 years. And at first, I didn't know where I was going to stay. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was just there. And there were a lot of people around. And it seemed like there were more and more people around me at that time. And I could feel people's energy. And yes, it became, after a while, it became exhausting for me. So, but then as soon as I thought of getting away to a more private place, it happened. So I didn't have that problem anymore of being exhausted by other energy of others.
And so do you still deal with that today? Is that still?
Yes, I still deal with that today, but it's not bothering me. I'm able to see it quickly, and if I need to, I'm able to cut myself off of it. Yes, so
Okay.
it's not nothing bad.
Yeah. Oh, I'm an empath, so
Right. Yeah.
I can totally. I'm just wondering how other people deal with it,
Of course.
and it's just part of this whole experience of awakening, and other people do have these psychic abilities by other means. Okay, I'm really interested in past life part. I'm going to read a little quote from your book. The sense of individual identity stays with the soul throughout all lifetimes, and that all souls carry similar characteristics.
Yes.
So, because I do have some psychic abilities, I was led by spirit to investigate a character named Gilgamesh, which I was never interested in, didn't have a clue. I just knew it was some story. And so from there, and at the same time, I was getting the impression like, this is your ex-boyfriend, Patrick. I'm like, okay, I don't have anything to do with him, so I will look at it, spirit. So I looked into it further, and I found that was him in a past life. And because the characteristics, the connections, there were so many connections there, I couldn't deny it. Right. And then I found out that I was Enkidu, the character with Gilgamesh, the heroes. And then another character, Ishtar, was my mother. And I did this through personality and patterns of behavior from one lifetime to another. So I'm curious about your experience with the past life part of the awakening. Did you see your past lives and who you were?
I did not see my past lives at the time when my experience was happening, but I understood clearly, because once soul awakens, then the soul knows that it lives across eons of times, and it is the same soul living through different incarnations. I did not particularly see at that time my past lives, but throughout my life, before and after the experience, yes, I've experienced that I know some of my past lives.
Did you get an impression that your characteristics and your personality were the same in those past lives during your experience?
During the experience, yes, you just as I wrote in my book, the characteristics of the soul are carried through the lifetimes, so that soul identity is the same. But I did not have it during my experience. I didn't have to go back there into the past lives, because it wasn't what it was about. My experience was keep on moving on. It was the staying in all those. The thing is that when you're present alive, gets realized at the time when your consciousness goes through the third chakra, this is when you when you don't have any more personal issues and problems in this lifetime. Of course, later, you may have things going on all the time, but your approach is different. But what I mean is that after your consciousness gets to this point of self-realizing as a conscious, immortal soul, then all the past lives get resolved. See? It just all becomes resolved. There is no more need to dwell on that. So before my experience, I had probably a little more of events where things seemed like deja vu, and situations and people were definitely taking me back to other lifetimes. But after the experience, I've met people who I knew were, for example, my flame. What is it called? The soul
flame.
Yeah,
Twin
the
flame or
flame.
soulmate.
Yeah. So all that it can happen before or after the experience, but it has a little bit different meaning afterwards. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So because some of my audience they may be not awoke or awakened.
Yeah.
What is the kundalini?
What is the kundalini? Okay, sure. Well, I use that word kundalini and subtle body and chakras because I was able to compare my experience to what's already known has been published and talked about for thousands of years. And in ancient India, that word kundalini was known, and kundalini means coiled up in Sanskrit. And it's, as you can see here, I don't know if you can see well, that there is this coiled up rainbow that's resting here in between first and second chakra. Kundalini is energy that's coiled up at the bottom of the spine. And we simply, throughout our lives, we don't even know about it. Whatever we know from the mind that's here, and we have some glimpses of awareness coming from upper chakras, but we don't really know that our consciousness is resting in between the first and second chakra in the sacrum area. And it has to either, usually it happens through some kind of either traumatic experience. Like in my case, I was suicidal, and suddenly I did not know anything about Kundalini. I didn't know that word. I didn't know anything about Kundalini rising, and nothing connected with it was familiar to me. I knew the word chakras, but someone explained to me in a very simple way what it was, and I went, yeah, right, of course. So I didn't believe in it. And whenever I thought of or maybe read something about spiritual enlightenment, I also couldn't connect it with anything that related to me in person, because I just had a very, very vague idea about it. So what it is, Kundalini is our consciousness. And the reason it's I can say that it is coiled up, it's because it was the first manifestation that I could see with my own eyes, that was out of this world. It wasn't something I've ever known about. And suddenly I could see in front of me a beautiful tube of rainbow light floating. And it was so scary because I was my mind was very clear at that time. And because I actually agreed to commit suicide, I could not find a way out. And I had my eyes closed, I opened them up, and there it was, that beautiful rainbow light floating, and it was moving just so beautifully. And I thought it was coming out of me. So I thought I need to run away. I started running away, but it was moving with me. So I realized, okay, well, I have a choice of just freaking out. And it all was happening in the bathroom of this old Victorian mansion where I lived. I was renting an attic. As an artist, I had a huge space upstairs, and I was sharing the bathroom with a bunch of people I didn't even know. And there I was. I went to take a shower hoping that it was going to soothe me and stop me from going further to the store and getting razor blades. And there the experience happened. And so on the background of this white tub, I saw this tube of light moving, and it was science fiction that was happening in reality. And it freaked me out so much, but I had to make that decision. I had the option of running out of the bathroom and yelling and screaming and whatever else would have happened together with it. Or actually, this is what I decided to do. I just thought to myself, I said to myself, whatever happens, I'm going to watch what's going on. And I sat down, and that's when the whole experience happened.
Could you briefly take us through the multi-dimensional perception of our chakras, as you rose up, just briefly kind of tell our audience what
it is. Yes. So for the ones who don't know about chakras and subtle body, for everybody, let's just describe briefly what the subtle body is, what kundalini energy is, and what chakras are, as we know from what's known about it throughout ages. Subtle body is an energy system of subtle energy that we have inside, and it consists of kundalini energy that's usually asleep at the bottom of the spine, and chakras, which are called energy centers. There is in the middle a shushumna, which is like a channel through the kundalini energy can go, but there are different drawings of this whole system. There are also nadis that are other channels that the energy can go up. And the whole point of the energy going up is that if that kundalini energy awakens, because normally it's asleep, it's slumbering, it's latent. So it's not completely asleep, but it's, in most of us, it's practically asleep, as dormant. We don't know that it's there, dormant. Yes, we don't know it's there. And sometimes we can find out that it's there, and sometimes it goes up. without our volition. It just suddenly wakes up, and if it starts moving around here in the area of the first chakra, we can have physical symptoms of heat in the back, because it's all along the spine. So we can have heat in the back. We can have moments of tightening and stiffening of the body. Then,
Pain?
Sorry?
Some pain as well?
Pain, yes, pain. Then, if it starts going through the emotional, the second chakra, we can experience powerful emotions. We can experience emotional charge that sometimes may be very difficult to bear. Maybe strong moments of depression or other emotions. So it can have to do with Kundalini moving up. Then as it moves up, it creates different, could create different reactions of the chakras. But basically, ideally, and in the most classical way, the chakras allow the Kundalini to go up all the way to the crown chakra. And as the energy gets here, the crown chakra opens up, and we unite in pure consciousness, in pure bliss with all there is. And we are conscious of being creators of this universe, of our life, of ourselves, and of everything. So it's called spiritual enlightenment, because the last stage of it is just light, and there is no way to come up with a thought. So that's what spiritual teachers who have gone through that experience always talked about. And then there is also, that's the way I see it, self-realization, which is a moment when soul, as I already mentioned, becomes aware of creating itself, of creating our life throughout all the lifetimes, and becomes aware of the soul self-realizes. So there are two steps. First, the soul self-realizes, and then it still goes through the process of self-inquiry at the very end. And if that process is complete, then we unite with everything there is. So that's in short description of the subtle body system and the purpose of it, the purpose of Kundalini rising. People can experience it sometimes on their deathbed. Sometimes the experience happens. For example, like Ramana Maharshi, as you can read in different sources about that, how he was 16 years old. Ramana Maharshi is one of the greatest contemporary spiritual teachers. He passed away in 1950, but there are books that describe his dialogues with his students and people who came to visit the ashram. And also there is a story about him having the full experience when he was 16. So he imagined that his body is dead. And through imagining, through trying to feel that state of being, his experience happens. So it does have to do with, like all spiritual masters are saying, with releasing the focus on the body. So
on the first three chakras, on the material.
Yeah, it's a progressive movement. So the transcendence basically has to happen through all of the chakras. So all of the chakras have to kind of allow the kundalini to go through. And if they are congested, they don't allow it. If they are not developed enough, it's also harder to for that consciousness to go through it. But basically, that's how it should go. In our case, we have to work with the first, second, and third, and mostly second and third chakra. But the transcendence itself has these stages. At first, you have to release the attention on the body and the material world and focus on the emotions. Deal with emotions in the way that I teach ways of dealing with emotions. And it's very important. This is where Kundalini usually gets triggered in us because of emotional baggage. Yeah, I call it congestion charge, pressure, emotional stimulation that is difficult to deal with. And that's when we have that opportunity to release emotional charge and move on. So leave the emotions behind in a state that they should be, which is in a neutral state, and then move up to the area of the mind. And in the same way, be able to release the energy that's stuck in the third chakra. As we know, there are many, many ways suggested, meditations, all kinds of meditations. I teach focusing the mind because I teach a very active way of doing all of that stuff. So it's not, I don't teach like guided meditation, but I just give tools to actually take all that kind of in your hands as your consciousness, because these are chakras and this is our consciousness. And in truth, that consciousness creates all that. It creates the subtle body. It creates the chakras, and it allows us to explore those dimensions. And this is the difference between what we already know from other published sources and what I'm teaching from my experience. I'm teaching about our consciousness being multidimensional, and that the chakras are actually the gates to those different dimensions. And as a single human being, we definitely have, each of us has that opportunity to open up, to develop and open up all of the chakras and move and let our consciousness move up. Our consciousness wants to know everything, right?
Right.
We want to know. We don't want to feel like we are stopped from getting knowledge, from doing better, from evolving. And it's our own limited consciousness that's an obstacle. And this obstacle is in closed up, congested chakras.
Could you give us an example of maybe something that you teach about the solar plexus and the emotions stuck there?
Oh yeah, sure. For example, what I teach, and the class is coming up. I'm going to do a class this Friday.
And that's is that on YouTube?
It's going to be on Zoom, but I think I may connect it to YouTube. I don't know yet. I think the Zoom could be connected to Facebook and YouTube at the same time, but I haven't I don't know. I didn't investigate it yet. I know it's going to be for sure on Zoom. So what I usually, when we are dealing with a person who is who desires to expand consciousness or to achieve higher levels of consciousness or simply get rid of personal problems, I start with the second chakra. Although the first chakra is important, I teach about the general premise of the first chakra, which is material world, and we are just a part of it. Just like anything, any material object, we're just a part of it. That consciousness that we have on that level is just the consciousness of being a piece of meat.
Me too.
Right. So that's the material world consciousness. And then there is emotional consciousness. And this is what the second chakra, this is how I experience it. Although there is a way of looking at that in a little differently, that second chakra is sexual and creative. I write about it as being only emotional, and sexual and creative are the attributes of our consciousness itself once it's in the body. So we all have congestions in the second and third chakra, just because we are, and the first one too, if we are ill, if the body is not doing very well, then there is something going on in the first chakra. But the second and third, there is a need for us to practice all the time, to practice bringing our emotions to the neutral state. And this is what I teach, how to do it, and of focusing the mind so we can observe one thought eventually, instead of having hundreds of thoughts beating at us daily and not really knowing which one is the one to go with. And we usually are led by the emotional reaction. So it's a combination here of the mental state and emotional state. And if we don't separate the nature of the second and third chakra, then we have a story. And that story, that story is the whole psychology and, oh my God, psychotherapy, psychology, and all that goes through our minds. And sometimes many of us get to the point where, like, there is so much going on that we don't know what's the best way to get out of it. And this is just the way it's supposed to be. These first three chakras, that's samsara. So the first three dimensions that those chakras open us to is the material, the emotional, and mental. And mental structures, they're endless. And we adopt mental structures from others, and we're fed by these structures. And really, there is no truth to it, but the truth that we see is kind of the logical, linear truth that we can observe during our daily life, and others are going through the same thing. Like, for example, COVID is there. We all know it's there. No one can deny that's the truth. But it's all in our way to deal with that. So we have to deal separately, and this is how I teach. We deal separately with emotions, and we deal separately with the mind. And first, we work out emotions, and sometimes it takes quite a bit of practice.
Do you have worksheets or a workbook that has prompts?
It's not so hard to explain. It's not so hard to explain because it's all very simple. The thing is, it's just nobody has ever thought in that way. There are notions of understanding the story as something that's an illusion, right? But to actually separate emotions from the mind is not something that anyone else has done before in that same way. And I was able to perceive it because in my experience, it happened gradually. That at first I did the exercise that I practiced for years myself because I had to. I did it. I did these exercises subconsciously. I had to deal with my depression in order to be able to function. And my depression was connected with a story, with not being able to be with my daughter, and not being able to be successful financially enough to actually have her with me and to live a comfortable life. So yes, there was a story. We all have a story, but I was able to deal just with emotions. And what was helping me, it was also the fact that I was able to treat my artwork like a therapy, a meditation. So the artwork, the visual artwork, is actually the sixth dimension, the chakra that opens us up to the sixth dimension. And we have many ways of dealing with focusing the mind. Meditation itself can be very helpful, but as I said, I'm teaching ways of focusing because focusing of the mind is actually what works. That's the best way. And some of us have that option with our careers, with our jobs, that those jobs allow us to focus on some kind of activity, and it's a repetitious activity. It could be even a very simple activity, but if we do it consciously and focus our mind on certain sequence of activities, that's very helpful. Or different ways, board games or physical activity like sports, like, for example, I help myself by skiing in winter, and that danger of killing myself allows my mind to focus, because otherwise I'm all over the place.
And breaking bones, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's one of the ways, and depending on our, everyone is different in their predispositions. Some people will have the fifth chakra open more, and they will be able to focus their attention on music, for example. And then the fifth chakra opens us up to all the psychic powers, to Akashic records, to visions from past lives as well. But it's also combined with the sixth chakra. So it's working on these three often involves combining it with upper ones, but it really depends on the person. What would be working the best for that individual.
Interesting. Okay, I need to ask, how many people in the world are actually enlightened? I mean,
it's probably a very controversial subject, because many people would like to think of themselves as enlightened, right? And I would not want to piss anybody off.
We can just give your opinion. I mean, you've probably heard some figure before in your work.
What I've read in a book from 80s called Cosmic Consciousness is that, and I mean, I don't know to what degree that is believable, but judging from what I've experienced since my experience, and people I've met and situations I've encountered, it could be a very very probable number, is that in that time, in I think late 70s or 80s, it was consideration was that there were maybe 1 in 40 million was fully enlightened.
Wow.
So I actually divided that. It looked like it was like 350 people.
And then at the time?
At the time, yeah.
Yeah, our population is much bigger now,
So
right?
now it's much bigger, so it could be 3 times as much, you know, could be more, I don't know. But we definitely, we won't hear from all of them, but we will hear from most of them, you see. So even if there was 750 people enlightened right now, the nature of that experience is that, you know, your consciousness is more and more residing up here, not anymore here. Your personal life becomes less and less important. And since the experience, you just don't worry about yourself. You just don't think about yourself. You and then you know that there is something you can give that helps. So you're made to do this. You're made to give the knowledge that you have, whatever it is, and that's what they do. If they have that knowledge, they want to share it. So you'll hear about them. Of course, it's absolutely, you know, at first when it happened to me, I thought, well, I can do whatever I want. And then some years later, when I finally realized that it wasn't just a few years of results of the experience. It wasn't, because I was watching myself too, and so you have your own knowledge about it, but then you go, well, is that going to be like this forever? You know, maybe something will change it, right? You still always think, well, thinking this mind, it always doubts. So I just wanted to make sure, and when I wrote my book, I wrote about the certainty. So once you have the certainty, then you can share the certainty with others. If they are like me, like I was, then they will definitely benefit from it, because I wasn't certain. I thought, well, maybe there is something there, maybe there is. You know, I was told that there is no love, you know, but now that I had the experience and my consciousness was here, explored that dimension, I know it's always there.
Right.
I'm certain of it. I'm certain of the it's I guess it's dark here, huh? Am I dark?
A little bit. Are you in the closet?
Hold on. I'm gonna give some more light to this. Oh, there it is. There we go. Oh, that's right in my eyes. I'm sorry. Okay. I just realized I'm looking and it's very dark.
I'm gonna ask, how would you compare your Kundalini awakening with a traditional Kundalini awakening, where somebody's been on the spiritual path and been going down that path to, get there?
Yeah, you know, the accounts of Kundalini rising and experiences of people who have gone through it. The one that we know about is by Gopi Krishna, and I think that was from 70s throughout 80s, I believe, or maybe earlier. And in truth, anything to me that ends up in calling for deities and gods and religions and agreeing with religion, that's not yet it. Because full enlightenment, you know, that the gods and religions are still in the sixth dimension. And once your consciousness breaks through the seventh chakra, then you know that nothing is true. That even the soul is not true. Even the soul doesn't exist. It's all in a potential, and it's all and inspiration is what gives energy to creation. And all religions and concepts, religious concepts and powers of archetypes and religions and all these systems are still in the sixth dimension. So, of course, there are people who definitely have gone through the experience completely. Like, for example, we know about Eckhart Tolle, right? Who describes his experience as first awakening to the issue of understanding that he's not his mind, because his mind was telling him one thing and he was this other person who was discussing it with his mind. And this is what happens when our consciousness goes up to the third chakra. And sometimes we have that realization that we are not our minds. But then later he has no clear description. It was like a whirlwind of something happening really fast, and then he suddenly found himself already in that state where everything was blissful and beautiful, and definitely he has something to say about it. As far as us, people living today and having awakenings, so many of us do have awakenings. And from what I understood so far, is that most of these awakenings are sudden openings of the upper chakras. So, for example, if you suddenly feel powerful love that's not necessarily to a person, but just you feel that love is there, your fourth chakra opened up. Maybe it was because of a religious or spiritual ceremony. Maybe it was because of some other happening that you've experienced and it was so powerful that suddenly you felt that. Or, there could be many motivations for that kind of happening. The same with the seventh and with the fifth and sixth chakra is that, for example, with the fifth, there could be so many different ways how it happens. For example, ghosts, boom, suddenly you're there in that world where you're tuning in with a being that's, you may know who that is, you may not know, maybe your family, or maybe it's somebody you've never talked to before, but you have the connection and you have exchange of energy, you have communication. Boom, your fifth chakra is open and you don't know, you've never had it before maybe. So it's a sudden opening of the fifth chakra. It can take you into Akashic records and knowledge about what happened in the past, and so there you are. You can experience so much through just opening of the fifth chakra. And the sixth one too. The sixth one is an amazing, has so many different layers, and sacred geometry, astrology, numerology, all the systems of divinations, all are there, and religions and religious concepts and sacred symbols, archetypes, gods, goddesses. That's all that world. So if these worlds suddenly, if our upper chakras suddenly open and we experience those worlds, That's an awakening, right? This is
Right.
what's called awakening. And the seventh is more particular, and seventh usually needs to be practiced a little bit. And I'm saying that because we don't have that knowledge in our modern civilization that much, because it has to do with philosophical thinking. And that's where meditation comes in, because many meditation schools will teach you to actually focus on the seventh chakra versus the third one. The seventh is this other mind that we have, that's not judgmental, that's not going for a goal, that's not thinking how to get things done and how to grab something or how to achieve something, but it's just the mind. Yes?
Would you call that the higher self?
You can call it the higher self, but I think the higher self would be the description of more like some kind of a higher being. But yes, we can use that in order to differentiate between the normal life,
like ego,
where the ego of the first three dimensions, where we are dominated by them. And it doesn't mean that we're closed off, but it means that the upper ones are not developed. We haven't cultivated them enough. And especially that one that has to do with witnessing, with watching, with discerning, with not being present in order to do some action with it, in order to turn it for our advantage. Like this is all survival. This is more just being there and watching, observing what's happening. And discernment comes when that chakra develops, and those small differences become more and more obvious to us. And it's not this mind. It's not the third chakra mind.
So how has this changed you and your life since this experience?
Yeah. There's no words to really describe fully what change it brought. But just from knowing who I was before, so, I was me, right? I was this foolishly brave, maybe in some ways, person who decided to leave Poland out of the blue in 1976 and throw myself into life, and I thought, I'm gonna make it, and and I got in trouble. I got myself in trouble because of my family situation and because of my desires, and eventually I became depressed, and I was one of those people who were raging, who were raging inside. People like that, right?
Sometimes.
Right. There are people, and I know that many of us are that way. We're raging inside about things. We're raging inside about things that happen, about a story. And sometimes it turns into depression, and sometimes it's fear, and sometimes it's... So in other words, I was ruled by
the ego,
by that, the story, the mind, what happened to my life. How come I didn't succeed? I'm an awful person. I'm horrible. I'm an idiot. I didn't, whatever it was, I had it.
Mm-hmm.
and so that was in a way that I saw it, but of course from the outside, not necessarily others saw it that way, because we don't present ourselves voluntarily that way to others in society. But this is where I was. And I never, we are relying on this reality so much that we constantly counting on it. It's gonna do this for us, and it's gonna do that for us, and we're supposed to be taken care of by it, and we have to fight with others in order to get our place in society. And so, with me, it just happened that I didn't want to fight, but I just wanted to fight myself. And I wanted to kill myself because I couldn't manage. I just couldn't manage. I just didn't know how to.
And so after the experience, how has it changed you in your life?
The main thing, I started noticing things afterwards right away, is that, you see, the whole happening is not just that you are suddenly happy, but you also know why. You know all the whys. And so I knew all the whys, but then I was also observing myself that, I had a lifelong conflict with my mother, who at some point took my daughter and did not want to give her back to me. And I did not realize that something like that could happen. I didn't think that that was something that my mother would do. And yet that's what happened. And I could not forgive myself, and I could not forgive my mother. And I had that conflict going on for years, and it was hurting me. I lived in pain. So pain and anger are close on the emotional scale. You kind of in between pain and anger. You're angry or you're in pain, or stuff like that. And it's something that was continual in my life. I would drop into that state more and more, and it was taking a lot of my energy. Well, afterwards, I couldn't even find the problem. It's just, I could see what happened, but it was not in me anymore. I could not find the charge inside of me. And this is what is continual. So there would be things that happen, tragic things or difficult things, and I go through the emotions, yes, but these emotions don't get stuck in me. That's probably the main difference, is that these emotions don't lodge themselves and attach to other emotions and compile into a whole big issue of emotional problem.
Is that something you teach to focus on?
Yes.
To just let those emotions pass through?
Yeah, this is what I teach when we talk about the second dimension. But overall, happiness is something that is so deep inside that nothing can ruin it. Because I know I don't see myself as so important anymore. It's everything is important, and love for everything is important. And so it's a shift of attention. Before, when we have these chakras congested, there is always the story that we want to push one way or another, the results that we're looking for, the desires that are pushing us, and we're under control of our mind and our emotions.
Right.
But after, it's not like that anymore. You can deal with the thoughts come. The thoughts would come because that here your soul has designed it already. You are supposed to have those emotions, and you're supposed to have those thoughts. It's your consciousness that needs to deal with them. And this is what I teach. I teach how our own spirit, which is consciousness, our own kundalini, can deal with anything that comes towards us in life, because we are immortal. We are immortal. Our consciousness is immortal, and nothing can kill our spirit.
Right.
So living with that and knowing why and being with it is something that, yes, I do have normal life.
Awesome.
But I have the certainty that I didn't have before.
Right. Do you have the knowing, the knowledge, the truth, which helps a lot?
It's very helpful whichever state of consciousness you are in, because before this whole experience happens, there will always be doubts in your mind. There will always be lingering emotions that will connect with other emotions from the past, and it will pull us down. And the story will pull us down. And unless we have the certainty that we can overcome it, because we are not our minds and we are not our emotions. We are a free being, individual unit of consciousness that at some point decided to create the body and lodged itself right here, created all that, and now is dealing with it. But half asleep.
Wow, that was a lot. I think I'm gonna rewatch this tomorrow because I got a lot out of it.
Cool. Thank you.
I want you to be able to share what you do down in Reno, or you do online classes as well. So
Yes, of course. I mean, the best way to contact me is through my website, which is www.moniquerebelle.com. You have my name right there, one word.com. And I am preparing an online course right now, which is going to, give more info than what we will be able to put in an hour today. But it's not a beginner's online course, but it's kind of less than intermediate, some kind of general knowledge about what we were talking about, because I'm bringing out the concept of multidimensional consciousness and looking at chakras as gates to the dimensions that are always there. So I'm teaching that on every level: beginners, intermediate, people who already have knowledge about chakras and have certain experience with being a spirit, with being conscious of having a body and dealing with life, but actually trying to find themselves as that magical, powerful, spiritual being. So I also teach self-inquiry, which is a little bit advanced, but it starts with learning about the third chakra. You asked about that, but I didn't have a chance to expand on it. Besides talking about the focusing of the mind, but I also teach the process of know thyself, which is what everyone needs. We need to know who we are, who we think we are, who we see ourselves as in life. And I double that with an astrological portrait, because I read charts, and so that understanding of who we are compared to what the influences of the stars from our natal chart are telling us is a step on towards self-inquiry, where we can ask questions that are already starting here. They're going up and up and up, and those questions are most helpful with the seventh chakra. So that's something I do. So anyway, people who want to know more about multidimensional consciousness for whatever reason, to help the world, to help themselves, it's they're all welcome.
I'm curious if you have any art shows or online.
Haven't planned. I have my website with my abstract work, that is moniquerebellepaintings.com. I have some of my artwork in Saatchi Gallery, I think it's saatchiart.com, but I'm not sure what the address is actually, sorry. I don't have any shows coming up right now because I've been focusing so much on my book and creating that course and teaching and writing a new book, that my last show was in Sierra Arts Gallery in Reno in February, throughout February. I don't have anything coming up online right now.
Okay, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm very honored that you came on and shared with us tonight. And we'll talk soon. I want to thank my viewers and subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julie. That was awesome. I really thank you for having me. It's great.